The carriage wheels crunched through snow as Emma Hartwell clutched her medical bag tighter. She had agreed to nurse a dying duke for one winter, but nothing could have prepared her for what awaited at Blackwood Manor. The letter from his steward had been clear. His Grace the Duke of Ravenshollow was on his deathbed, and no respectable woman would take the position. Emma needed the money too badly to care about respectability. Her father's debts would not wait for spring. The manor loomed ahead like a dark castle from a fairy tale. Smoke curled from several chimneys, and warm light glowed in a few windows. At least the place looked lived in, not like the tomb she had expected. Emma pulled her woolen cloak tighter as the carriage stopped. The driver helped her down and handed her single trunk to a waiting footman. Miss Hartwell. The butler appeared at the massive front doors. He was younger than she expected, with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. "I am Matthews. His Grace is expecting you." Emma followed him through halls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The walls were covered in rich tapestries, and thick carpets muffled their footsteps. For a house with a dying man, it felt surprisingly alive. Servants moved quietly through the corridors, and she caught the scent of fresh bread from somewhere below. "His Grace insisted on meeting you immediately," Matthew said as they climbed a grand staircase. "He has been anxious about your arrival." Emma found that odd. Most dying patients she had tended were too weak to care about much beyond their next dose of medicine. But perhaps dukes were different. She had never nursed nobility before. Her experience was limited to village folk and merchant families who could afford her services. Matthews stopped before a heavy oak door and knocked softly. "Your Grace, Miss Hartwell has arrived." "Enter," came a voice from within. It was deeper and stronger than Emma expected from a man supposedly on his deathbed. The room was magnificent. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace large enough to roast a pig. Heavy curtains in deep blue velvet hung at tall windows. The bed dominated the space, a massive four-poster draped in matching blue fabric, and there, propped up against a mountain of pillows, was the Duke of Ravenshollow. Emma nearly gasped. This was not the frail, wasted man she had prepared to nurse. The Duke was perhaps 30 years old, with thick, dark hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His face was pale. Yes, but not with the grey pallor of approaching death. His shoulders beneath his white nightshirt looked broad and strong. "Miss Hartwell," the Duke said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I am grateful you accepted my situation. I know it cannot be easy, caring for a man in my condition." Emma set down her bag and approached the bed. Something felt wrong, but she could not put her finger on what. "Your Grace, I am here to provide whatever care you require. Perhaps you could tell me about your symptoms." The Duke's eyes flickered for just a moment. "The physicians say it is a weakness of the heart. It grows worse each day. I fear I may not see spring." Emma frowned. His color was good, and his breathing seemed steady. She had seen many heart conditions, and this man showed none of the usual signs, but perhaps the illness was only beginning to show itself. "May I examine you, Your Grace?" "Of course." The Duke lay back against his pillows and watched her with those sharp green eyes. Emma placed her fingers against his wrist. His pulse was strong and steady, not weak or irregular as she would expect. She moved her hand to his forehead. No fever. She listened to his chest with her ear, as her father had taught her. His heartbeat was completely normal. "How long have you had these symptoms?" she asked, stepping back. "Several months now. The attacks come and go. I have good days and bad days." The Duke's voice was perfectly calm, but Emma caught something in his expression. Was he amused? "I see. Well, I will prepare a room nearby so I can attend to you quickly if needed. Matthews mentioned that other nurses refused the position. The Duke nodded gravely. They found my condition too distressing. I hope you will not find the same, Miss Hartwell. Emma looked at him more closely. There was definitely something he was not telling her. But the gold coins promised in his letter would solve all her problems. She needed this position, mysterious circumstances or not. I assure you, Your Grace, I have seen many conditions in my work. Nothing disturbs me easily. Excellent. The Duke smiled, and for a moment he looked like a man planning something rather than one facing death. Matthews will show you to your room. We keep country hours here. Dinner is at 6, and I would be honored if you would join me. If my health permits, of course. Emma curtsied. Of course. Your Grace, I will check on you again this evening. As she followed Matthews from the room, Emma felt the Duke's eyes on her back. There was definitely more to this situation than met the eye. But winter was coming fast, and she had nowhere else to go. Her room was smaller but still luxurious by her standards. A fire already warmed the space, and her trunk had been unpacked. A maid appeared with hot water and fresh linens. Emma washed the travel dust from her face and hands, then sat by the window to think. The Duke was not dying. She was certain of it. But why would he pretend to be? And why hire a nurse for a fake illness? Emma had heard stories of wealthy men with strange habits, but this seemed elaborate even for an eccentric duke. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Matthews entered with a tea tray. His Grace thought you might need refreshment after your journey. Thank you. Emma accepted the delicate china cup. The tea was perfectly brewed, with tiny cakes that melted on her tongue. Matthews, may I ask how long His Grace has been ill? The butler's expression grew carefully neutral. I am not qualified to discuss His Grace's medical condition, miss. That would be best left to him. Another non-answer. Emma sipped her tea and tried a different approach. Has he had many nurses before me? A few. They did not stay long. Matthews gathered the empty cups. His Grace can be particular about his care. Emma was more convinced than ever that something strange was happening, but the afternoon was growing late and she needed to prepare for dinner. She had brought only one good dress, deep green wool that brought out her eyes. It would have to do for dining with a duke. When Matthews came to escort her downstairs, Emma felt nervous for the first time since arriving. What did one talk about with nobility? Her experience was limited to country squires and merchant families. The dining room was as grand as the rest of the house. A long table that could seat 20 had been set for 2 at one end. Crystal glasses caught the light from dozens of candles. The Duke was already there, dressed in a dark jacket, despite his supposed illness. He looked healthy and handsome in the flickering light. Miss Hartwell, you look lovely. The Duke rose to pull out her chair himself. His movements were smooth and strong, nothing like a man with a weak heart. Thank you, Your Grace. Emma settled into her seat, hyper-aware of his nearness as he pushed in her chair. The first course arrived, a delicate soup that warmed Emma from the inside. The Duke ate with good appetite, another sign that he was not as ill as he claimed. Tell me about yourself, Miss Hartwell, the Duke said, as the soup bowls were cleared. How did you come to nursing? Emma chose her words carefully. My father was a physician in the village of Millbrook. I learned from watching him treat patients. After he died, I found I could support myself with the skills he taught me. I am sorry for your loss. It must be difficult, a young woman alone in the world. There was genuine warmth in his voice that surprised Emma. I manage well enough, Your Grace. I find nursing rewarding work. even when it means spending winter in an isolated manor with a dying man. Emma met his eyes across the table. Even then, the Duke smiled, and Emma felt her heart skip. There was something magnetic about him when he smiled like that. She had to remind herself that he was lying to her about his condition. The main course was roasted beef with vegetables from the manor's gardens. Emma had not eaten so well in months. The Duke kept the conversation light, asking about her journey and her impressions of the countryside. He was charming and witty, nothing like the grim, wasted man she had expected to nurse. "The snow is beginning again," the Duke observed, nodding toward the tall windows. Fat flakes drifted past the glass. "We may be snowed in soon. I hope that does not concern you." "Not at all." Emma sipped her wine, better than anything she had tasted before. "I am here for the winter, whatever the weather brings." "Good." The Duke's green eyes held hers for a long moment. "I find myself looking forward to your company, Miss Hartwell." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was something in his tone that made her pulse quicken. She reminded herself sternly that he was her patient, even if he was pretending to be sicker than he was. After dinner, the Duke suggested they take coffee in the library. Emma followed him through more corridors lined with paintings and sculptures. The library was enormous, with shelves reaching to the ceiling and comfortable chairs arranged before another massive fireplace. "Please sit." The Duke gestured to a chair near the fire. "I find the evenings can be lonely here." Emma settled into the soft leather chair while the Duke poured coffee from a silver service. He moved with easy grace, no sign of weakness or pain. Whatever game he was playing, he was committed to it. "Do you read, Miss Hartwell?" The Duke handed her a delicate cup. "When I can. My work does not leave much time for books." "Then you must take advantage while you are here. My library is at your disposal." The Duke sat across from her, coffee cup cradled in his hands. "What do you enjoy reading?" Emma thought of the few books she owned, mostly medical texts and one volume of poetry her father had given her. "I like stories," she said finally, "tales of adventure and romance." The Duke's eyebrows rose slightly. "Romance? I would not have taken you for a romantic, Miss Hartwell." Emma felt her cheeks warm again. "I suppose everyone dreams of love, Your Grace, even practical people like nurses. And have you found love in your practical life?" The question was too personal, but something in his tone made Emma answer honestly. "No. My work takes me from place to place. There is little time for attachments." "That seems a waste," the Duke said quietly. "A woman like you should have a dozen suitors." Emma's heart began to race. This conversation was moving into dangerous territory. "Your Grace, perhaps we should discuss your treatment plan for tomorrow." The Duke's smile was almost wicked.
"Why?"
"Of course. My apologies. I forget myself sometimes. The isolation here makes one forward in conversation." Emma finished her coffee quickly and stood. "I should check on you before I retire. May I take your pulse again?" "Certainly." The Duke remained seated but held out his hand. Emma tried to ignore the warmth of his skin as she pressed her fingers to his wrist. His pulse was still strong and steady, but it quickened slightly under her touch. She looked up to find him watching her intently. "Your heart seems strong tonight," she said softly. "Does it?" His voice was low, almost intimate. "Perhaps your presence is medicinal." Emma dropped his hand and stepped back. "Your Grace, I should retire now. Good night." "Good night, Miss Hartwell. Sleep well." Emma hurried from the library, her heart pounding. Whatever the Duke was doing, he was dangerous to her peace of mind. She had felt the pull of attraction between them, and that was the last thing she needed. She was here to work, nothing more. But as she prepared for bed in her luxurious room, Emma could not stop thinking about the way the Duke had looked at her. There had been heat in his green eyes, and something else, something that made her wonder what secrets he was hiding. Emma woke early the next morning to find snow piled high against her windows. The world outside was transformed into a white wonderland, beautiful but isolating. Matthews had been right. They were likely snowed in now. She dressed quickly and went to check on her patient. The Duke was awake, sitting up in bed with a breakfast tray across his lap. He looked perfectly healthy in the morning light. "Good morning, Miss Hartwell. I trust you slept well?" "Very well, thank you." Emma approached the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Weak," the Duke said, but his voice was strong. "The cold weather affects my condition badly." Emma felt his forehead. Still no fever. "Perhaps you should stay in bed today then. Rest is important for heart conditions." "An excellent suggestion." The Duke smiled. "Would you sit with me for a while? I find conversation helps distract from the discomfort." Emma pulled a chair beside the bed. The Duke finished his breakfast while they talked about books and travel. He was well educated and witty, with stories about London society that made Emma laugh. It was hard to remember he was supposed to be dying. "Tell me about Millbrook," the Duke said, as a servant cleared away his tray. "What was it like growing up there?" Emma described her childhood in the small village, helping her father with patients, learning about herbs and medicines, the simple pleasures of country life. The Duke listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. "It sounds peaceful," he said when she finished. "Very different from my life." "What was your childhood like?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. The Duke's expression grew distant. "Lonely. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by tutors and servants, trained for my duties as Duke. There was little time for warmth." Emma heard real sadness in his voice. Whatever game he was playing now, his childhood pain seemed genuine. "I am sorry. That must have been difficult." It was what it was. The Duke shrugged, but Emma caught the flash of hurt in his eyes. "I learned early that people want things from you when you have wealth and title. It becomes hard to trust anyone's motives." Emma stared at him. Was that what this was about? Was he testing her somehow, pretending to be ill to see how she would treat him? The thought was both insulting and intriguing. "Your Grace," she said carefully, "surely there must be people in your life who care about you for yourself, not your position." "Are there?" The Duke's green eyes held hers. "How would I know the difference?" Emma felt her heart clench at the loneliness in his voice. I suppose genuine care shows itself in small ways. Kindness without expectation of reward. Attention to your needs rather than your wealth. Like a nurse who tends a patient without knowing if he will live to pay her. The Duke asked softly. Emma's cheeks warmed. "I suppose so, yes." The Duke was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Miss Hartwell, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really take this position?" "The truth, please." Emma hesitated. She had already revealed more than she intended, but something in his expression made her want to be honest. "My father left debts when he died. Substantial debts. If I do not pay them by spring, I will lose everything. Our house, his medical books, everything that remains of my family." The Duke nodded slowly. "So you need the money I promised?" "Yes." Emma lifted her chin. "But that does not mean I will not provide good care." "Your Grace, I take my responsibility seriously." "I believe you do." The Duke's voice was gentle. "Thank you for being honest with me." Emma spent the rest of the morning reading to the Duke from one of his books, a collection of poetry that seemed to please him. His eyes drifted closed as she read, and she thought he might be sleeping. But when she stopped, his eyes opened immediately. "Please continue," he said. "Your voice is soothing." Emma read until lunch, acutely aware of the Duke watching her. There was something in his gaze that made her feel beautiful and desired. Dangerous feelings for a woman in her position. After lunch, Emma suggested the Duke rest while she explored the manor. She needed space to think, away from his intense green eyes and magnetic presence. The house was even larger than she had realized. There were portrait galleries and music rooms, a conservatory filled with winter plants, and dozens of bedrooms that looked like they had not been used in years. The servants she met were friendly but careful not to discuss their master's condition. Emma ended up in the conservatory, surrounded by lemon trees and exotic flowers. The glass walls were fogged with condensation, creating a private green world. She was studying a particularly beautiful orchid when she heard footsteps. "I thought I might find you here." Emma turned to see the Duke approaching. He was fully dressed in riding clothes, looking healthy and vital. No sign of weakness or illness. "Your Grace, should you be out of bed?" The Duke smiled. "I felt much better after our conversation this morning. Fresh air seemed appealing." Emma stared at him. He looked like he could ride for hours without tiring. "Perhaps you should not overexert yourself." "Perhaps not." The Duke stopped beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and masculine. "But I wanted to show you something." He led her to the far end of the conservatory, where a small sitting area overlooked the snowy gardens. "This was my mother's favorite spot. She spent hours here in winter, tending her plants." Emma could picture it. A gentle woman finding solace among growing things while snow fell outside. She must have loved it here. She did. I used to sit with her sometimes when I was small. She would tell me stories about the flowers, where they came from, how to care for them. The Duke's voice was soft with memory. "You miss her every day." The Duke turned to look at Emma. "You remind me of her a little. She was kind, like you, genuine." Emma's breath caught. He was standing too close, looking at her with an expression that made her knees weak. "Your Grace." "Adrian," he said quietly. "When we are alone, call me Adrian." "I could not. It would not be proper." Adrian smiled. "Very little about this situation is proper, Emma. May I call you Emma?" Hearing her name in his deep voice sent shivers through Emma. This was wrong. He was her patient, and she was his employee. But the way he looked at her made her forget every rule of propriety she had ever learned. I should check on your condition," she managed. "Should you?" Adrian stepped closer. "And what would you check, Emma?" Emma's heart hammered as he raised his hand to touch her cheek. His fingers were warm and gentle, tracing the line of her jaw. "Your pulse," she whispered. "Feel it then." Adrian took her hand and placed it against his chest. His heart was beating fast and strong under her palm. Emma could feel the warmth of his skin through his shirt, the solid muscle beneath. This was not the chest of a dying man. "Adrian," she breathed, forgetting protocol entirely. He leaned down until his forehead touched hers. "Emma, sweet Emma, do you know what you do to me?" Emma was drowning in his nearness, in the heat of his body and the intensity of his gaze. She should pull away, should remember her place. Instead, she found herself swaying closer. "This is madness," she whispered. "Yes," Adrian agreed, his lips brushing her temple. "Complete madness." The sound of approaching footsteps broke the spell. Emma jerked back just as Matthews appeared. "Your Grace, you have a visitor." Adrian straightened, instantly composed. Who is it, Matthews? Lord Pemberton, Your Grace. He says it is urgent. Adrian's jaw tightened. Tell him I am indisposed. Miss Hartwell was just checking my condition. Matthews nodded. Of course, Your Grace. As the butler left, Emma wrapped her arms around herself. What had almost happened was impossible, dangerous, and completely improper. She was here to work, not to fall under the spell of a charming duke. Emma, Adrian began, but she shook her head. I should return to my duties, Your Grace. You need rest. Adrian's expression was unreadable. Of course, my apologies if I overstepped. Emma fled the conservatory without another word. But as she hurried through the corridors, she could still feel the warmth of his hand on her cheek, still hear her name spoken in his deep voice. That evening Emma dined alone in her room. She claimed the Duke needed rest, but the truth was she needed distance from his dangerous charm. Every moment in his presence made her forget why she was there. But Adrian, she could not think of him as the Duke anymore after this afternoon, had other plans. Near midnight, a soft knock came at her door. Emma? Are you awake? Emma's pulse leaped at the sound of his voice. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, still fully dressed. Is something wrong? Are you having chest pains? Adrian smiled ruefully. In a manner of speaking, may I come in? Emma knew she should refuse, but she stepped aside. Adrian entered her room and closed the door behind him. The space suddenly felt very small and intimate. I could not sleep, he said simply. I wanted to apologize for this afternoon. My behavior was inexcusable. It was unexpected, Emma managed. Adrian moved to stand by her window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. Emma, I must tell you something, but I fear it will change everything between us. Emma's heart began to race. What is it? Adrian turned to face her, his expression serious. I am not dying. Even though Emma had suspected as much, hearing him say it was still a shock. I know, she said quietly. Adrian's eyebrows rose. You know, I suspected from the beginning. Your pulse is strong, your color good. You show none of the signs of heart disease. Emma met his eyes. But I do not understand why you would pretend such a thing. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Because I needed to know. Know what? Whether someone could care for me, for Adrian, not for the Duke of Ravenshollow and his fortune. Adrian's voice was raw with emotion. I have been betrayed before, Emma. Women who claimed to love me, but only wanted my title and wealth. I grew tired of wondering if anyone could see past the coronet. Emma stared at him. So you pretended to be dying to test me? Yes. Adrian's jaw tightened. I know how it sounds. I know it was wrong. But I had to know if you were different. Emma felt anger rise in her chest. You lied to me, made me believe I was caring for a dying man. Do you know how that feels? Watching someone you... She stopped, horrified at what she had almost said. Someone you what, Emma? Adrian stepped closer. Emma turned away. Someone you have grown fond of, she finished weakly.
Only fond?
Adrian's voice was soft. Emma closed her eyes. She would not bare her heart to a man who had been lying to her for days. You have had your answer, Your Grace. I cared for you believing you were dying, with no hope of reward. Surely that proves whatever you needed to know. Emma, please look at me. Emma reluctantly turned. Adrian's green eyes were intense with emotion. You are right. I have my answer. You are everything I hoped you would be. Kind, genuine, beautiful inside and out. I am falling in love with you, Emma Hartwell. Emma's heart leaped, but anger still burned in her chest. How can I believe anything you say? You have been lying since the moment I arrived. Because this is the truth. Adrian stepped closer. I love the way you read to me. The gentleness in your hands when you check my pulse. I love your laugh, your honesty, the way you blush when I look at you. I love that you chose nursing because you want to help people, not for money or status. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. His words were everything she had dreamed of hearing, but how could she trust them? I love that you are brave enough to winter alone with a stranger, Adrian continued. I love that you argued with me about proper behavior, even while you wanted me as much as I wanted you. Adrian's, stop. Emma's voice cracked. I cannot stop, not now that I know what it feels like to have someone see me, really see me, without pretense or expectation. Adrian reached for her hands. Emma, I know I have no right to ask this after what I have done, but could you forgive me? Could you love me? Emma looked into his eyes and saw everything she had longed for, passion, sincerity, hope. But she also saw the desperate need of a man who had been alone too long. I do not know, she whispered honestly. You hurt me, Adrian. The deception, it makes me question everything I thought I knew about you. Adrian's face fell, but he nodded. I understand. I will leave you alone to think. But Emma, please give me a chance to prove that everything I feel for you is real. After he left, Emma sat by her window watching snow fall and thinking about everything that had happened. Adrian's deception was cruel, but she understood the pain that drove it. He had been alone and mistrustful, seeking proof that someone could care for him without ulterior motives. The question was whether she could forgive him, and whether she could trust her own feelings for a man who had started their relationship with lies. Emma did not sleep well that night. She kept thinking about Adrian's words, the emotion in his voice when he spoke of love. Part of her wanted to run to him, to forget everything except the way he made her feel. But the practical part of her, the part that had learned to be cautious in a world that often disappointed, urged care. The next morning brought fresh snow and a message from Adrian. He would be conducting estate business all day and would not require her services. He was giving her space. As promised. Emma spent the day exploring more of the manor and thinking. She met Mrs. Cooper, the head housekeeper, who was happy to share stories about the house and its master. His Grace is a good man, Mrs. Cooper said, as they took tea in the kitchen. He takes care of all his people, makes sure no family on his lands goes hungry, but he is lonely, miss. Has been since he was a boy. He mentioned losing his parents young. A terrible accident when he was only 15. Been the Duke ever since, with all that responsibility. Never had much chance to be young. Mrs. Cooper studied Emma with knowing eyes. Might be what he needs is someone who sees past all that responsibility to the man underneath. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. I am only here as his nurse, Mrs. Cooper. The older woman smiled. Of course, miss, but I have eyes. I have seen how His Grace looks at you, and how you look at him. Been a long time since this house felt so alive. That evening, Emma joined Adrian for dinner as usual. He was polite but distant, giving her the space she had asked for. But Emma found herself missing the warmth in his eyes, the intimate conversation that had marked their previous meals. How was your day? She asked, as they ate. Productive. The snow has caused some problems with supply deliveries to the village, but we are managing. Adrian's tone was formal, careful. Emma realized she hated this polite distance between them. Adrian, his eyes flicked to hers at the sound of his name, hope flickering there. I have been thinking about what you told me, Emma continued, about your reasons for the deception. Adrian set down his fork. And I understand why you did it. That does not make it right, but I understand. Emma took a breath. I also understand that you are a man who has learned not to trust easily. But Adrian, trust cannot be built on lies. You are right. Adrian's voice was quiet. I realize that now. I thought I was being clever, but I was only being a coward. Not a coward. Lonely. There is a difference. Adrian's eyes warmed at her gentle tone. Emma, is there any chance? Can you forgive me? Emma studied his face, the strong jaw, the green eyes that had haunted her dreams, the mouth that had almost kissed her in the conservatory. She thought about his loneliness, his need to be loved for himself. She thought about the way he made her feel when he looked at her. I can forgive you, she said finally, but, Adrian, if there is to be anything between us, it must be built on truth from now on. Anything you want to know, I will tell you honestly. Emma nodded. Then tell me this, what happens when spring comes, when my employment here ends? Adrian leaned forward intently. That depends on you, Emma. I had hoped you might consider staying. As what? Your nurse? We have established you do not need one. As my wife. Emma's breath caught. Adrian, I know it is presumptuous. I know we have known each other only days. But, Emma, I have never felt this way about anyone. You make me want to be the man you believed me to be when you thought I was dying, someone worthy of your care and devotion. Emma's heart raced. Marriage to Adrian would solve all her problems, her father's debts, her uncertain future. But more than that, it would give her something she had never dared hope for, a love that matched the romantic stories she treasured. You would marry a country nurse with no fortune or connections. Adrian smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all day. I would marry Emma Hartwell, the woman who read poetry to a dying man and made him remember what it meant to hope. Emma felt tears threaten. I need time to think. Of course, there is no hurry. Adrian reached across the table to cover her hand with his. Emma, whatever you decide, these days with you have been the happiest of my life. That night, Emma lay awake, thinking about Adrian's proposal. Marriage to him would be everything she had dreamed of. Love, security, a chance to belong somewhere. But it would also mean giving up her independence, her career such as it was. More than that, it would mean trusting completely in the love of a man who had already deceived her once. Could she do that? Could she risk her heart so completely? The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. Adrian was unfailingly courteous, but gave Emma space to think. They shared meals and quiet conversations, but the passionate intensity of their earlier encounters was banked, waiting. Emma found herself studying Adrian when he thought she was not looking. She watched how he treated the servants, with kindness and respect. She saw how he handled his estate business, with fairness and genuine concern for his tenants. She began to see the man Mrs. Cooper had described, not just the charming Duke who had been testing her heart. One afternoon, Emma was reading in the library when Adrian entered. He looked troubled, and Emma felt immediate concern. What is wrong? She asked, setting aside her book. Adrian sat across from her with a heavy sigh. I have received word from London. There are rumors circulating about my supposed illness, and about you. Emma's stomach dropped. What kind of rumors? The worst kind. Someone has been telling stories about the Duke of Ravenshollow secluded in the country with a mysterious woman, supposedly dying but looking quite healthy when seen about the estate. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lord Pemberton, the man who visited a few days ago, apparently left unsatisfied with my excuse of being indisposed. What does this mean? It means your reputation could be ruined. if we do not act quickly. A woman who spends winter alone with an unmarried duke under suspicious circumstances. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. Emma, I am so sorry, this is my fault entirely. Emma felt cold fear creep up her spine. A ruined reputation would mean no more nursing positions, no way to support herself. She would be completely dependent on charity or marriage. What can we do? She asked quietly. Adrian met her eyes. There is only one solution that will protect you completely. We must marry immediately. Emma stared at him. You want to marry me to save my reputation? I want to marry you because I love you, Adrian said firmly. But yes, if that is what it takes to protect you from the consequences of my stupidity, then we will marry for that reason too. Emma's mind raced. Marriage to Adrian, under these circumstances, would answer the question of whether he truly cared for her or was simply being honorable. But did it matter? Either way, she would be his wife, with all that entailed. Emma, Adrian said gently, I know this is not the romantic proposal you deserve, but please, let me protect you. Let me give you my name and my fortune. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the trouble I have caused. Emma looked at him, this complex man who had lied to her out of loneliness and pain, who was now offering everything he had to protect her from scandal. She thought about the alternative, returning to her village in disgrace, losing any chance of respectability or happiness. But more than that, she thought about how she felt when Adrian looked at her with love in his eyes, how he made her laugh with his stories, how gentle his hands were when he touched her, how empty her life would be without him in it. Yes, she said quietly. Adrian's eyes widened. Yes, yes, I will marry you. Emma smiled through sudden tears. I love you too, Adrian. Despite everything, despite the lies and the deception and the scandal, I love you. Adrian was out of his chair and pulling her into his arms before she could draw another breath. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. Emma, he whispered. My sweet, brave Emma. I promise you will never regret this choice. Emma pulled back to look at him. When? Tomorrow, if you are willing, I can have the bishop here by evening. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. Unless you want a grand wedding, I can arrange whatever you desire. Said Emma shook her head. I do not need grand gestures, Adrian. I just need you. Adrian's smile was brilliant. Then tomorrow it is. Tomorrow you will be my duchess, and no one will ever question your place at my side. He kissed her then, finally, softly, at first, and then with growing passion. Emma melted into his embrace, all her doubts and fears forgotten in the warmth of his love. The next day passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Mrs. Cooper produced a beautiful dress that had belonged to Adrian's mother, ivory silk with delicate lace that fit Emma perfectly with only minor alterations. The village church was too far in the snow, so the ceremony would be held in the Manor's chapel. Emma had little time to be nervous as servants bustled around her, arranging flowers and preparing a wedding feast. Adrian sent word to the village, and despite the weather, several tenants made the journey to witness their duke's marriage. As evening approached, Emma stood before the mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself in the beautiful dress. She was about to become a duchess, something that would have seemed impossible just days ago. The knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Matthews entered with a small velvet box. From His Grace, miss. He asked me to give you this before the ceremony. Emma opened the box to find an exquisite emerald necklace, stones the exact color of Adrian's eyes. The note inside read, "These were my mother's. She would have loved you as I do." Emma touched the necklace with trembling fingers. In just a few minutes, she would walk down the aisle to marry a man who had deceived her, tested her, and ultimately won her heart completely. The chapel was small but beautiful, lit with dozens of candles. Adrian waited at the altar with the bishop, looking devastatingly handsome in formal evening dress. His eyes found Emma's as she entered, and his smile took her breath away. Emma had no father to give her away, so she walked alone down the short aisle. But she did not feel alone. Adrian's love wrapped around her like warmth, and the faces of the servants and tenants who had come to witness their marriage were kind and welcoming. When she reached Adrian, he took her hands in his and whispered, "You are beautiful beyond words." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Emma's voice shook slightly as she promised to love and honor Adrian, but his voice was strong and clear as he pledged his devotion to her. When the bishop pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian's kiss was gentle and reverent. "My Duchess," he murmured against her lips, and Emma felt her heart overflow with happiness. The wedding feast was joyful despite the hasty arrangements. Adrian never left Emma's side, introducing her to his tenants and making sure she felt welcomed into her new role. Emma was touched by how genuinely the people seemed to care for their duke, and how readily they accepted her. "You have made him happy," Mrs. Cooper told Emma during a quiet moment. "I have not seen His Grace smile so much in years." As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Emma found herself alone with her new husband in their chambers. Adrian had moved his things to the Duchess's suite adjoining his own, giving them privacy while maintaining propriety. "Regrets?" Adrian asked softly as he helped her remove the emerald necklace. Emma turned to face him. "None. You?" "Only that I wasted so much time with deception when I could have been honest from the beginning." Adrian's hands settled on her waist. "Emma, I want you to know, everything I told you about my feelings was true. Every word." Emma reached up to touch his face. "I know, and Adrian, I love you. Not the Duke, not the title or the fortune. I love the man who sits with me by the fire and tells me stories. The man who remembers his mother with such tenderness. The man who was so afraid of being alone that he created an elaborate test to find love." Adrian's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Emma smiled. "We found each other in the middle of a snowstorm, two lonely people who needed exactly what the other could give." Adrian kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, pouring all his love and gratitude into the caress. Emma responded with her whole heart, finally free to show him how completely she had fallen under his spell. Later, as they lay entwined before the fireplace, Emma traced patterns on Adrian's chest and marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I was remembering the day I arrived. I thought I was coming to nurse a dying duke for one winter. I never imagined that the dying duke was testing your heart." Adrian's voice held gentle humor. Emma laughed. "That I would fall completely in love with him, deception and all. And I never imagined that my foolish test would bring me the one thing I had given up hoping for, a woman who could love me for myself alone." Emma lifted her head to look at him. "No more tests, Adrian. No more deceptions. Just us. Just truth from now on." "Just truth," Adrian agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. Outside, snow continued to fall on Blackwood Manor, but inside, the new Duke and Duchess of Ravenshollow had found something worth more than all the winter's cold. They had found a love that would last through every season of their lives. Spring came eventually, as it always does. The snow melted, revealing gardens ready to bloom under Emma's loving care. She had taken over her mother-in-law's conservatory and filled it with new life, just as she had filled the manor itself with warmth and laughter. Emma's father's debts were paid without question, his medical books installed in the Manor's library next to volumes of poetry and romance. Emma still practiced her healing skills, tending to tenants and servants who needed medical care, but now she did so as the Duchess, not as a hired nurse, and the respect and affection she earned were genuine. The scandal that had precipitated their hasty marriage died quickly once society saw how devoted the Duke and Duchess were to each other. Emma's grace and kindness won over even the most skeptical critics, and Adrian's obvious happiness silenced any remaining gossip. On their first wedding anniversary, Adrian found Emma in the conservatory among the orchids his mother had loved. She was tending a new plant, a tiny seedling she had coaxed from seed. "What are you growing?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Hope," Emma said softly, leaning back against his chest. "I thought we could use more of it." Adrian smiled and pressed a kiss to her temple. "I think we have plenty of hope, my love, but I am always happy to have more." Emma turned in his arms to face him. "Adrian, there is something I need to tell you." Something in her tone made Adrian's heart skip. "What is it?" Emma's smile was radiant. "We are going to have a baby." Adrian stared at her for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably carried throughout the manor. He spun Emma around carefully, both of them laughing with delight. "A baby," he repeated wonderfully. "Emma, are you certain?" "Quite certain. Mrs. Cooper suspected before I did. She says I have been glowing for weeks." Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief. "She also says you have been insufferably smug lately." "I have good reason to be smug. I have the most wonderful wife in England, and now," Adrian placed his hand gently over Emma's still flat stomach. "Now we will have a child to carry on that wonder." Emma covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it." Adrian's voice was thick with emotion.
"Emma, when I think of where we started, with my lies and your desperation, both of us so afraid of being hurt."
"And look where it led us." Emma smiled up at him. "Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely beginnings." Adrian kissed her softly, tasting the truth of her words. A year ago, he had been a lonely, suspicious man who thought he needed to test a woman's heart to find love. Now he was a husband and soon-to-be father, surrounded by more happiness than he had ever dared imagine. "I love you, Emma Blackwood, Duchess of Ravenshollow," he murmured against her lips. "And I love you, Adrian, my husband, my heart, my very best friend." Emma's smile was brilliant with joy. Who would have thought that agreeing to nurse a dying duke for one winter would lead to this? "Someone very wise once told me that the heart knows what it needs, even when the mind does not understand," Adrian said softly. "My heart knew I needed you from the moment you walked into my room with your medical bag and your gentle hands." Emma laughed. "Your heart knew you needed someone to call you on your deception." "You mean that too?" Adrian grinned. "I needed someone brave enough to see through my lies to the truth underneath. Someone who would love me despite my flaws." "Not despite them," Emma corrected. "Because of them. Your flaws are part of what makes you human, Adrian. Part of what makes you mine." As they stood together in the conservatory where his mother had once found peace, surrounded by growing things and filled with hope for the future, Adrian marveled at the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. He had set out to test Emma's heart, never realizing that she would end up healing his own. The baby arrived in late autumn, a healthy son with Emma's gentle spirit and Adrian's determined chin. They named him William after Emma's father, and he became the joy of the entire household. Mrs. Cooper proclaimed him the most beautiful baby ever born, and even the stoic Matthews was seen making silly faces to coax smiles from the young heir. Emma proved to be a wonderful mother, just as she had been a devoted wife. She sang lullabies as she rocked baby William, the same gentle voice that had once read poetry to a pretend invalid. Adrian would often find her in the nursery, holding their son and telling him stories about his grandparents, both the Duchess' father, who had been a healer, and the Duke's parents, who had loved each other deeply, but were taken too soon. "He will know he comes from love," Emma told Adrian one evening as they watched their sleeping son. "On both sides, love and more love." "He will never doubt his place in the world," Adrian agreed. "Never wonder if he is valued for himself alone." Emma smiled and leaned against her husband's shoulder. No tests needed. Just open hearts and honest words. As winter approached again, their second as husband and wife, Emma and Adrian settled into the rhythm of their life together. They had found something precious in the midst of deception and need, a love built on truth, tested by time, and blessed with hope for the future. One snowy evening, as Emma nursed baby William by the fireplace in their private sitting room, Adrian read aloud from the same book of poetry that Emma had shared with him during those first uncertain days. His voice was warm and steady, filled with the contentment of a man who had found his place in the world. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Emma asked during a pause in his reading. "When I arrived believing you were dying." Adrian looked up from the book, his green eyes soft with memory. "Every day, I think about how terrified I was that you would see through my charade, and how desperately I wanted you to at the same time. I think about how lonely you looked, even surrounded by all this luxury." Emma shifted William to her shoulder, patting his tiny back. "And how my heart broke a little every time you pretended to be weaker than you were." "My heart broke too," Adrian admitted. "Every time you showed me kindness I did not deserve. Every time you worried about my health when I was perfectly fine. I fell in love with your gentleness before I ever deserved it." Emma smiled. "We deserved each other, Adrian. Two people who had forgotten how to trust, how to hope for love. We found our way together." Adrian set aside the poetry book and moved to sit beside his wife. He wrapped his arms around both Emma and their son, pulling them close. "We did more than find our way," he said softly. "We found our family, our future, our forever." Outside Blackwood Manor, snow fell softly on the gardens, where spring flowers slept, waiting for warmth to wake them. Inside, three hearts beat in perfect contentment. The Duke, who had learned that love could not be tested, only trusted. The Duchess, who had discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness. And the baby, who would grow up knowing that he was the product of a love story that began with deception but ended with absolute truth. Emma had agreed to nurse a dying Duke for one winter, not knowing he was testing her heart. But in the end, they had both passed the only test that mattered, the test of time, of trust, of choosing love over fear, and they had won a prize neither had dared dream of, a love that would last through all the winters of their lives, warming them from the inside out with the knowledge that they had found their perfect match in each other. In the quiet of that snowy evening, surrounded by the family that had grown from their unlikely beginning, Emma and Adrian knew they had written their own romance, one that would have satisfied even the most demanding reader of love stories. It was a tale of second chances and redemption, of lonely hearts finding their home in each other, of love conquering deception to create something beautiful and true. And like all the best love stories, it was just the beginning.